When you think of dynamic duos in the world of Transformers, there aren't that many that come to mind. I mean, of course you have classics like Inferno and Red Alert, but outside of romances, no two Transformers really have a strong bond with each other. And if somebody starts telling me about IDW, I think my brain will melt out my ass. And that brings us to today's subjects. Some of the finest engineers on Cybertron and some of the best friends in all of Transformers. We have the Earthrise Grapple and the Earthrise Hoist. Taking a closer look at Hoist first, honestly, you really wouldn't be able to tell that this figure is 4 years old. The painting and the sculpting here is absolutely phenomenal. This guy's panel lining just flows all throughout. I love how absolutely classic this design is. The greens and the yellows do pop on this figure quite a bit. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this, but I really love the clear windshields. Something about having a translucent windshield on a figure really makes it pop. The head sculpt is absolutely immaculate and the eyes are painted to perfection. Also love the gunmetal gray they used for his face shield. That is just absolutely awesome. Honestly, if I had to complain about something with the sculpt or paint on this figure, it has to be, why did they put siege scuff marks on him? And it's not only just on his stomach, it's on the forearms too. Looking back and even at the time, why? No figure in Earthrise has this except for him. I don't understand why they carried it over with just one figure. But honestly, on Hoist, it doesn't bother me nearly as much as some of the Siege figures did. Because he's an old towing truck, of course he's gonna be kinda dinged up. Also, Transformers. War robots. Yeah. Now going over Grapple sculpting in detail. This is still one of my all-time favorite Earthrise figures, and for good reason. Something about this figure just screams to me. I'm so glad they didn't go with a gaudy yellow for this figure, cause that would have been atrocious. The darker orange, like what they used on the original toy, definitely makes this figure better in my opinion. The sculpting on this guy is absolutely phenomenal. You can see almost every little rivet and wire. Again, I will say I love the translucent windshield and lights up here. And of course, the headlights also have that. The head sculpt is kind of odd, but only because the area around the eyes is very translucent. The area around the eyes isn't solid plastic like most other Transformers figures, so it left this gap around the whole eye, which really just lets light bleed through. I mean, it doesn't look awful, but doesn't look pretty. The colors also really help the sculpting on this guy. If he was a lighter yellow or maybe even a darker yellow, a lot of the detail here would be lost, which is actually truly a shame because this guy is absolutely packed full of amazing wire and panel lining detail. So while both of these guys really dish out the looks, what do they really play like? Grapple is surprisingly pretty nimble. For how chunky and blocky he is, he can strike a mean fluid pose. He is mostly a designer and an architect, but if he has to, he will fuck you up. He can crouch down and do the Bayverse Optimus Prime pose. Studio Series Optimus Prime can't even do the Optimus Prime pose. I mean, it can, but definitely not as good as this. I guess if I had to make one complaint, it'd be that he doesn't have a ball joint at the head. Sadly, what his head is just a mushroom peg. I mean, I understand why. This head design really doesn't allow for a lot of maneuverability and fudgeability to get in there. It isn't that big of a deal, but as somebody who really loves articulation, it kinda is. And now for Hoist. Although he has just as much, if not more, going on than Grapple at a smaller scale, he is just as, if not more, nimble. And to get out of the way so I can just praise the articulation scheme of this figure, you probably know what I'm about to say. This back flap right here. Yeah, I know they're accurate, but that doesn't mean I have to like them. The whole side of the fucking truck mode is hanging off the back of his arms. The arm itself isn't even the thing that moves. It's the actual flap. Why? There's literally no reason for this to be happening at all, or for this to have to happen at all. Now, I do know a mod that can fix it, but I don't want to try it right now, and I don't think I have the skill to try it right now. Basically, what you do is you cut it off right there and glue it to the leg where it goes for transformation. With that out of the way, I can finally praise this guy's articulation. Now, he is a little bit too chunky and husky to get the Bay vs Optimus Prime pose, but he can kinda get there. I absolutely love that he has double knees, and an absolutely godlike elbow joint. And of course, they're Transformers, so they're gonna have some weaponry. Going over HOIST's accessory first, I'm sure you've seen it throughout this whole review, but it is his little hand thing. Sadly, unlike what was in the show, it isn't an actual clasp or his actual hand, it's just like a holdable accessory. At least the sculpting for it is absolutely phenomenal. Of course, it just plugs right into his hand like that, and he holds it like a gun. Personally, I really hate this, and I have never been able to get over it. I have tried to rectify it just a little bit though. Thankfully, the wrist is on a hinge. You can turn around, and at some angles, you can kinda sorta fix it. And honestly, it works very, very well in static poses. But the second you start turning him around, it all starts crumbling apart, and the illusion is lost. Maybe someday we'll get a 100% G1 accurate hoist with a retractable arm, but for now, this actually does pretty okay. And Grapple has a many more accessories. He comes with a gun that is very reminiscent of the G1 toy. I actually really love this gun. It reminds me of like a little machine gun, and I love Transformers with like machine guns. Put it in his hands and he can blast Decepticons all day. But what happens if, say, he loses his hands? That, my friends, is where these come in. This longer, skinnier one is actually really cool. I love the silver paint that's applied to it, and of course, it is Blast Effect compatible. And the second one is just a claw. It's cast in a nice black plastic, and honestly is my favorite accessory with this figure. Earthrise was doing their whole interconnected bridge system thing, so it has a clip in here, but I don't have anything to clip into it anymore. And both of those just go onto his hand so he can weld and grapple. So, as a short statement about the robot mode, I actually truly love both of them. They feel really nice, they play really nice, and they just look very nice as well. But of course, they're not Transformers for nothing, so let's transform them. After a pretty simple and interesting transformation, Grapple's truck mode is actually really sick. Obviously, it's extremely small for a crane, but it's still awesome looking. The crane arm is on a full 360 swivel and does ratchet up and down, and has a little hook attachment at the end, which is a pretty cool detail. But it also has a port so you can put in that hook thing, grapple. As most people probably know already, the big issue with this figure is the pegs in the feet. On most copies, and including on mine, it is extremely scary to transform because those pegs are extremely fragile. Sadly, I know a few people who have had theirs break, and it is a travesty. I really don't understand how Hasbro can screw something up that widespread on almost every copy of a single figure. Yikes. And I can say pretty much the same thing about Hoist, but just, I like him more. The only weird part about this figure is the fact that the windshield is translucent blue, but the side windows aren't. I understand why it's like that due to transformation, but it's still just a weird inconsistency. Also, another nitpick I have is how high the bumper is on this figure. And of course, the color scheme on this thing is absolutely fantastic. I failed to mention it in robot mode, but I love that he has a big, bright red insignia right on here. I love the translucent blue and silver they used for the bumpers and headlights. I love how small it is. It is a very compact and nicely fitting truck. How couldn't I mention the amazing caution tape stripes on him? All of that really makes this figure pop, and the fact that you don't usually get some dark green Transformers. So that leaves us with some very decent vehicle modes. While they both have their problems, they are still both extremely fun and easy to play with. So, without further ado, let's get into my final thoughts. So, what are my final thoughts on these figures? There are two videos, some of the earliest videos I've ever made on the channel, of finding these two. HOIST was actually the first Enemy Scrotum unboxing. Actually, that was before they were called Enemy Scrotum Unboxings. So these two have been around the channel for a very long time, and I'm surprised it took me this long to get to a video for them. I love the sculpt and the paint on these. I love that the windshields are actually translucent. I love their accessories too, although I do have some nitpicks, mainly with HOIST. And articulation. For two pretty chunky figures, they are very nimble. And honestly, I couldn't have it any other way. Hopefully someday we get more screen-accurate versions, but for now, these two are perfect in my opinion. I'd definitely get them if I were you. That is, if you could still find them. Anyway guys, I'll see ya on the flip side. Peace!